Does it seem like everyone's maybe a little bit more on edge during this pandemic? We're all facing a lot of difficulties. Maybe you've had some major job changes, a major change in your routine, and you're working from home now. You're sitting at a dining room table across from your kids who are trying to do schoolwork, and all of a sudden your house feels so small. Maybe you're a mom that's had to take a leave of absence or quit work because you've had to stay home with your kids. Maybe those things have created some financial difficulties. Maybe we just all need to get out more, take a good vacation to the beach, or go out to eat on a Friday night and not have to worry about what we've touched or how close we're sitting to people. I think it's fair to say we're all a little bit on edge, more so this year than years in the past. And so, as we work with our 7 things we can do heading towards Easter, the third thing that we're going to talk about this week is practicing patience. We're going to look at a story from Mark chapter 5. Jesus has just crossed a lake, going from one interaction where he's dealing with a demon possessed man, crosses the lake, probably to get away from crowds, only to find himself surrounded by more crowds pressing in on him, the Bible says. And in the middle of all these people pressing in on him, here comes the synagogue leader who rushes up to Jesus to tell him that his daughter is dying and he needs Jesus' help. I'm sure Jesus has been inundated with requests for help and people pleading with him to do something. Jesus agrees, and he's walking towards the house of this dad, and the crowds are still pressing in around him. And a woman who's been sick her whole life reaches up and grabs Jesus' coat, hoping to be healed. Jesus feels power leave from him. Not exactly sure. I've never experienced that myself, but clearly Jesus had. He knew something had happened, and he stopped and he spun around and he says, "Who touched me?" And here's where I'm going to take a little bit of liberty, if you will, and read into this story. I've always read this story more with a gracious response from Jesus, but as I read this story more in preparing for this, maybe Jesus was irritated. Maybe he was stressed out. He had a lot going on. He had a lot that people were demanding of him, and here he is going to deal with a very stressful situation, a dying daughter, and somebody reaches out uninvited and grabs his cloak, and he says, "Who touched me?" And the disciple says, "Well, how are we supposed to know who touched you? Look at this crowd all around you." And he asked again, and here was my clue that kind of tipped me off, is the woman was trembling with fear. So if Jesus was in a good mood, she probably wouldn't have been trembling with fear. She came up to Jesus and said, "It was me." And here's the cool thing. Jesus, I could almost see his face relax. And maybe he takes a deep breath. And I know we talk about holy righteousness or righteous indignation, righteous anger. Maybe Jesus had a little bit of righteous frustration or righteous stress. And you can almost see him. He sees the lady and has compassion on her. He knows her situation. He knows that she's been sick her whole life. And he sees that she has spent her every penny she has to find a cure unsuccessfully, and is desperate and reached out and grabbed him in her desperation. And all of a sudden he melts. He says, "Woman, your faith has healed you." How many times this year have we been frustrated, stressed out, irritable? Who knows why, what's going on in our lives? And maybe one of our kids says something, does something, our spouse, a coworker, and we're ready to snap. And maybe rightfully so. Maybe it is something they do, quote unquote, deserve it. But maybe we could also just stop. Remember that they're going through this situation too. We're all going through this pandemic together. We've all had to make changes in our lives and deal with situations that we don't like. We've all made sacrifices. And maybe we can stop and see the person who's irritated us and practice a little patience and say, "You know what? I'm going to show them grace, whether they deserve it or not." That's the thing about grace. Grace is undeserved favor. I'm going to show them a little grace. I'm going to practice a little patience. I'm going to respond kindly. And so here's the one thing I want to leave you with. In the midst of this, like we said, there's so many things we can't control. We can't control our circumstances, but we can control our response. We can control our reaction to those circumstances, and we can practice patience in the midst of them.